The millionaire doctor paid attention to the new resident. Her choice changed his life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The hospital never truly sleeps. But at 3:17 in the morning, it feels different. Quieter. Heavier. The overhead lights hum softly, casting a pale glow across long white hallways that smell faintly of antiseptic and coffee that has been sitting too long on a warming plate. Dr. Ethan Caldwell walks those halls every night like he owns them. In many ways, he does. At 42, he is one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons in the state, the founder of a private medical group worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and a man whose name is printed on hospital wings, research grants, and donor plaques. Nurses straighten when he passes. Administrators lower their voices. Even senior doctors choose their words carefully around him. But tonight, Dr. Caldwell is not thinking about money, or prestige, or the board meeting waiting for him in the morning. He is thinking about a resident he was not supposed to notice. Her name is Dr. Clare Morgan. She is new, barely 3 weeks into her residency. She still wears slightly oversized scrubs, the sleeves rolled once at the wrists. Her hair is always pulled back, neat but not stylish. No designer watch. No confident swagger. Just a slim notebook tucked under her arm and a quiet focus that most people overlook. Most people, but not him. Ethan first notices her during a late-night consult in the intensive care unit. Room 614. A middle-aged man recovering from emergency bypass surgery. The monitors beep steadily. The room is dim, curtains half drawn. Claire stands at the foot of the bed, listening. Not just to the machines, but to the patient. She speaks softly, explaining what she is doing even though the man is barely awake. She adjusts his blanket, not because it is medically necessary, but because his fingers are cold. She notices a tremor in his hand that was not in the chart. She writes it down anyway. Ethan watches from the doorway, unnoticed. He tells himself it is nothing. Residents come and go. Most burn out. Most follow instructions, keep their heads down, and wait for approval. That is how the system works. But Claire does not rush. When the nurse suggests skipping part of the assessment to save time, Claire shakes her head gently and says, "It will only take another minute." Not defensive, not arrogant, just certain. That minute matters. Later, in the hallway, Ethan overhears an attending physician criticize her for being slow. "You cannot save everyone," the man says. "This is not medical school anymore." Claire nods. She does not argue, but her shoulders stiffen, just slightly. Ethan should walk away. Instead, he pauses. He tells himself he is only observing, that it is his hospital, his standards, his responsibility to ensure quality care. That is the excuse he has used for years. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. He is curious. Over the next few nights, he starts noticing patterns. Claire is always the last to leave a patient's room. She double-checks medication doses even when the orders are clear. She learns names, not just diagnoses, names. She brings an extra pillow from an empty room because one patient complains about neck pain. She stays an extra 10 minutes past her shift to sit with an elderly woman whose family never visits. No one asks her to do these things. She chooses to. Ethan, a man who built an empire on efficiency and results, feels something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Years ago, he had been like that too. Before the accolades, before the lawsuits, before he learned that caring too much could cost you sleep, relationships, and peace. Somewhere along the way, he had decided that distance was safer. Claire does not seem to know that lesson yet. At 2:45 in the morning, an alarm sounds from the cardiac step-down unit. Not an emergency, just a fluctuation. The kind that often resolves on its own. Most residents would monitor and move on. Claire goes in. Ethan watches as she studies the monitor, then the patient's face. She notices something subtle. A change in breathing rhythm, a faint grimace. She makes a decision, not a dramatic one, not heroic, Just a quiet choice to call for a test that is not technically required yet. The nurse hesitates. "Doctor, are you sure?" Claire nods. "I would rather be early than sorry." Ethan feels his pulse slow as he watches, because in that moment, he realizes something that unsettles him deeply. This young resident is not trying to impress anyone. She is trying to protect someone. And without knowing it, she has just stepped into the path of a man who forgot what that looked like a long time ago. What Ethan does not know yet is that this small choice, made in the middle of a silent hospital night, is about to change his life in ways money never could. And Claire has no idea who is watching her. By sunrise, the hospital looks ordinary again. Day staff fills the corridors. Coffee carts roll by. Conversations rise and overlap. The quiet weight of the night fades, replaced by routines and checklists. But for Dr. Clare Morgan, nothing feels ordinary. She stands at a sink in the residence lounge, scrubbing her hands longer than necessary, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes look tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from the kind of pressure that never quite leaves her chest. Claire is not supposed to make waves. She knows this. She is on a probationary rotation, still being evaluated. One complaint, one note that says, "does not follow directive," and she could be quietly reassigned. Or worse, labeled difficult. In medicine, reputations form fast and last forever. She thinks about the attending physician's words from the night before. "You cannot save everyone." Claire exhales slowly. She is not trying to save everyone. She is just trying not to miss someone. That distinction matters to her, even if no one else cares. Her phone buzzes with a reminder. Student loan payment due. Rent in 5 days. Her checking account balance flashes briefly in her mind, uninvited. She pushes the thought away and heads back onto the floor. Room 614. The patient she checked overnight is stable. The early test results are not alarming, but they are not perfect either. There is something there. Something subtle. Claire adds another note to the chart. Careful. Specific. Defensible. She is very aware that every decision she makes now must be justified twice. Once medically, once politically. Across the unit, Dr. Ethan Caldwell reviews reports on a tablet, surrounded by administrators who trail him like shadows. They talk about funding, surgical outcomes, donor schedules. Ethan listens, nods, responds when required. But his eyes drift. He finds himself scanning the floor, almost unconsciously, until he spots Claire standing at the nurse's station, explaining something calmly to a worried family member. She gestures gently, lowers her voice, meets their eyes. No rushing, no empty reassurances, just honesty. Ethan feels an old, uncomfortable sensation stir inside him. Years ago, he had believed medicine was about moments like that. Before he learned how easily empathy could be exploited. Before mistakes cost millions. Before caring became something you rationed, like time. He looks away. Focus, he tells himself. Later that afternoon, Claire is called into a small conference room. 2 attending physicians sit at the table. One of them flips through her chart notes. "About last night," the senior doctor says, not unkindly. "You ordered an additional test." Claire nods. "Yes, you know it was optional." "Yes," she says again, steady. "But given the patient's symptoms, I felt it was appropriate." There is a pause. The kind that stretches just long enough to make your stomach tighten. "You are new," the doctor continues. "You need to learn efficiency. We cannot treat every case like a worst-case scenario." Claire swallows. She chooses her words carefully. "I understand," she says. "But if I am wrong, the cost is time. If I am right, the cost of waiting could be higher." Silence. One of the doctors leans back, studying her. "You are willing to stand by that?" "Yes," Claire says. "I am." She leaves the room 10 minutes later, heart pounding, unsure whether she has just defended herself or sabotaged her future. Down the hall, Ethan receives a brief update from the same attending physician. A comment about a new resident who is technically sound, but perhaps too cautious. Ethan does not respond right away. "Which resident?" he asks. The name lands between them. "Clare Morgan." Ethan nods once. "I see." That evening, as the sun dips low and the hospital windows reflect streaks of orange and gray, Ethan walks past room 614 again. He slows without meaning to. Inside, Claire stands beside the bed, reviewing vitals. She notices him this time. Their eyes meet. For a brief second, she freezes. She knows who he is. Everyone does. Dr. Caldwell. The name on the building. The man who could decide her fate without ever learning her first name. She straightens instinctively. Professional. Neutral. Ethan gives a small nod. Not approval. Not judgment. Just acknowledgement. Then he moves on. Claire releases a breath she did not realize she was holding. What she does not know is that, for the first time in years, Dr. Ethan Caldwell has begun to question the way he measures value. Not in outcomes or efficiency charts, but in choices made when no one is watching. And Claire, simply by being herself, is forcing him to look at the cost of everything he once let go. Neither of them understands it yet, but the ground has shifted, and the consequences are just beginning. The days begin to blur together. For Clare Morgan, time is no longer measured in hours, but in vitals, lab results, and the small rituals that anchor her through each shift. She arrives before sunrise and often leaves long after the sky has gone dark again. Room 614 becomes part of her rhythm. Every morning, she checks the same things in the same order. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, blood pressure. She listens longer than required, her stethoscope resting against the patient's chest as if she is waiting for something more than sound. She speaks anyway, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to fill the silence. "Good morning," she says one day, adjusting the sheets. "Your heart rate looks better today. Still stubborn, though." The patient does not respond. He is sedated, eyes closed, body still, except for the steady rise and fall of his chest. But Claire keeps talking. She explains what medications he is receiving. She tells him when the sunlight reaches the window in the afternoon. She tells him when it rains. She has read the studies. She knows patients may not hear, or may hear more than anyone understands. Either way, she believes presence matters. This is not something she was taught. It is something she chose. Nurses notice first. She stays longer. One of them murmurs during a shift change. "Does not rush." Another shrugs. "She reminds me of how we used to work." Claire does not hear these conversations. She is too busy charting carefully, documenting everything she does, aware that consistency is her only protection. Across the hospital, Ethan Caldwell watches the data. Numbers never lie to him. They never have. He reviews reports late one evening, alone in his office, the city glowing beyond the glass. The patient in room 614 shows minor improvements, not dramatic, not miraculous, but steady. Ethan frowns. He pulls up the timeline. Medications unchanged. No new interventions from senior staff. No procedures added. Only one variable stands out. The resident assigned most frequently to the case, Clare Morgan. He tells himself correlation is not causation. He has built his career on not jumping to conclusions, and yet, he begins to notice something else. When Claire is on duty, the nursing notes are calmer, fewer alerts, fewer adjustments. The room feels different. Not quieter, exactly, more settled. One evening, Ethan walks the floor again. This time, he stops. He stands just outside room 614, unseen. Inside, Claire is finishing her assessment. She wipes the patient's arm gently after adjusting an intravenous line. The gesture is slow, almost careful. She pauses, then straightens the pillow beneath his head. "There," she says softly. "That should help." She hesitates, then adds, almost as an afterthought, "You are doing your part. I will do mine." In example, Ethan feels something twist in his chest. He remembers his first years as a doctor. The long nights. The belief that effort alone could tip the balance. He remembers when he stopped saying things like that out loud. Claire finishes her notes and steps back. For a moment, she just stands there, hands folded, as if listening for something only she can hear. Then she leaves. Ethan does not enter the room. He does not need to. The next morning, a nurse flags a minor change. Slight improvement in responsiveness. Barely measurable, but there, Claire notices immediately. She does not celebrate. She does not call attention to herself. She simply records it and continues. That is her routine. Care. Observe. Repeat. By the end of the week, the attending physician reluctantly admits that the patient's progress is unusual. Nothing conclusive, he says. But interesting. Ethan says nothing. Inside, something long dormant begins to stir. He has spent years believing that outcomes come from control, from protocols, from authority. Claire is quietly challenging that belief, not with arguments, not with defiance, but with consistency, with presence, with a kind of care that does not announce itself. Ethan realizes, with a mix of discomfort and awe, that whatever is happening in room 614 did not start with a machine or a decision made in a boardroom. It started with a routine, and routines, he knows, are choices repeated until they become truths. Neither of them understands it yet, but the pattern has been set, and soon it will demand an answer from them both. The change is small at first, so small that most people would dismiss it as noise. A slight variation in heart rhythm, a pause where there was none before, a subtle tightening of fingers when Claire speaks. But Claire sees it. She always does. It happens during an afternoon check, sunlight slanting through the narrow window of room 614. The monitors hum their familiar pattern. Claire is mid-sentence, explaining the next medication adjustment, when she feels it. A faint pressure. She freezes. Her fingers are still resting lightly against the patient's wrist. The pulse beneath her touch has not changed much, but something else has. A tiny, deliberate movement. Almost like resistance. Almost like intention. Her breath catches. "Did you feel that?" the nurse asks quietly, standing nearby. Claire nods slowly. Yes. They stand still for a moment, both afraid to break whatever fragile thing has just surfaced. Claire straightens and moves into motion, calm but focused. She checks the pupils. She speaks the patient's name clearly. She asks him to squeeze her hand. Nothing dramatic happens, but something has. The numbers do not spike. Alarms do not sound. There is no miracle. There is awareness. Claire documents everything. Precise language. No speculation. She knows better than to overstate. But when she leaves the room, her hands are trembling. Down the hall, Ethan Caldwell receives the update from a nurse who rarely calls him directly. "Doctor," she says, measured but unmistakably alert. "We are seeing early responsiveness in 614. Ethan pauses. "How early?" he asks. "Subtle, but consistent." "Huh." Ethan ends the call and stares at the screen in front of him. Unread emails forgotten. He walks. Not fast. Not slow. Just deliberate. Outside room 614, he stops. Through the glass, he sees Claire standing at the bedside again, explaining the results, her voice steady, her posture composed. She looks exhausted. She also looks alive in a way he has not seen in a long time. Ethan steps inside. Claire turns, startled. "Dr. Caldwell," she says quickly, instinctively straightening. "I was just reviewing the latest response." "I know," Ethan replies. His voice is calm, neutral. He looks at the patient, then at the monitors. "Show me." Claire does not hesitate. She walks him through the data, the timeline, the changes, her reasoning. She does not exaggerate. She does not downplay. She simply presents the truth as she sees it. Ethan listens, really listens. For the first time, he is not measuring her against protocols or projections. He is watching how she thinks, how she notices, how she cares. When she finishes, there is a silence. "This is not typical," Ethan says finally. "No," Claire agrees. "But it is real." He nods slowly. Outside the room, later that evening, the reaction is less measured. "This is coincidence," one attending physician says flatly. "We are reading into it, or we are finally paying attention," another counters. The discussion grows tense. Words like liability and precedent are thrown around. Someone suggests transferring the case to a senior specialist. Someone else mentions cutting back on non-essential time. Claire listens from the edge of the group, heart sinking. She knows this moment. The moment where progress invites control. Where her presence might be seen as unnecessary. Or worse, unprofessional. Ethan says nothing until the room quiets. "We will not change the care plan," he says evenly. "Not yet." A few heads turn in surprise. "We observe," he continues. "We verify. And we respect what is working." The room goes still. Claire looks at him, stunned. Ethan does not look back. Later that night, Claire returns to room 614 alone. She speaks softly, the way she always does. "You did well today," she says, unsure who she is really talking to. "Keep going." As she turns to leave, the patient's fingers curl again, this time unmistakably. Claire covers her mouth, tears welling despite her control. Down the hall, Ethan stands watching the monitors reflect in the glass. For the first time in years, he allows himself to hope, and hope, he knows, is dangerous. Because once you see it, you have to decide whether you are willing to protect it, even if it costs you something. The shift that night feels heavier than the others. Not louder, not more chaotic, just weighted with the kind of tension Claire has learned to recognize, the kind that comes before something breaks or changes. Room 614 has become a focal point. Too many eyes, too many opinions. Claire notices it in the way conversations stop when she enters the break room, in the careful tone of the charge nurse when schedules are reassigned, in the way one attending physician no longer meets her gaze. Progress attracts attention. Attention attracts control, and control rarely comes without consequences. Midway through her shift, Claire is called back into the same small conference room. This time, the atmosphere is colder, more formal. Two attending physicians, a risk management representative, a tablet on the table, open to policy guidelines. "We need to discuss boundaries." One of them begins. "Your level of involvement in this case has exceeded expectations." Claire sits upright, hands folded in her lap. Her heart pounds, but her voice remains steady. "I have followed protocol," she says, "and documented every step." End quote. "No one is questioning your documentation," the other doctor replies, "but emotional investment can cloud judgment. We need to consider rotating you off the case." The words land hard. Claire feels the familiar pull in her chest, the instinct to comply, to protect her position, to avoid standing out. She thinks about her loans, her rent, the thin margin she lives within. She also thinks about the patient's hand tightening around her fingers, about the way responsiveness appeared only after days of quiet consistency. "If you remove me," Claire says slowly, choosing honesty over safety, "you remove the routine that has worked." Silence fills the room. "That is not your decision," the risk manager says. "No," Claire agrees. "But the consequences will affect the patient, and I am not comfortable ignoring that." The attending physician exhales sharply. "You are asking us to take a risk." Claire lifts her eyes. "I am asking you not to." Later that night, Ethan Caldwell reads the report. He recognizes the language immediately. Concern masked as policy, control framed as caution. He leans back in his chair, fingers steepled, staring at the ceiling of his office. For years, he has made choices like this without hesitation. He has removed variables, simplified systems, prioritized predictability over possibility. It has made him successful. It has also made him distant. He knows what the safe decision is, and for the first time in a very long time, he knows it is the wrong one. He walks to room 614 just before midnight. Claire is there, sitting beside the bed, speaking softly as she adjusts the monitor leads. Ethan stops in the doorway. "Dr. Morgan," he says. Claire looks up, startled. "Yes? They are considering rotating you off this case," he says plainly. Her shoulders tense. "I know. Do you disagree?" Claire hesitates. She has learned that honesty can be expensive. "Yes," she says finally. "I do." "Why?" Ethan asks. Claire looks at the patient, then back at Ethan. "Because he responds to consistency, and because I believe presence is part of treatment, even when it cannot be measured yet." Ethan studies her. "You understand what this could cost you," he says. "Yes," Claire replies. "But I also understand what it could cost him." The words settle between them. This is the choice. Not dramatic, not heroic, just clear. Ethan nods once. "Continue your care," he says. "I will take responsibility." Claire's breath catches. "Dr. Caldwell, that is not a favor," he adds. "It is a decision." When he leaves, Claire stands frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by a mixture of relief and fear. She turns back to the patient, voice unsteady but sincere. "We are still here," she says. "Together." Down the hall, Ethan pauses alone. He knows what he has done. He has chosen uncertainty over control. He has chosen trust over protocol. And in doing so, He has crossed a line he once promised himself he never would. Because protecting this kind of care means exposing himself to criticism, to doubt, to loss, but also, perhaps, to something he forgot he needed. The choice has been made, and from this point on, there will be no neutral ground, only consequences. The change is not immediate. It never is. For the first few days after Ethan's decision, nothing outward shifts. No announcements. No emails. No acknowledgement from administration. The hospital continues as it always has, efficient and impersonal. But beneath the surface, something has altered. Clare feels it first. Not in the way people speak to her, but in the way they hesitate, the way orders are phrased more carefully, the way her notes are read more closely, then left untouched. She understands the unspoken message. She is no longer invisible. That knowledge sits uneasily on her shoulders. Room 614 remains her anchor. The patient's responsiveness continues to improve in quiet increments. Fingers move with intention now. A slight turn of the head, a change in breathing when Clare speaks. One evening, as she checks vitals, the patient's eyes flutter. Just once, Clare freezes, heart racing. She leans closer, voice low and steady. "You are safe," she says. "You are in the hospital. Take your time." Has and my, the eyelids do not open again. But they tried. Clare documents the change, hands shaking despite her effort to stay composed. Outside the room, Ethan watches through the glass. He has stopped pretending this is only professional curiosity. He reviews the footage from the monitor logs, the timestamps of Clare's presence aligning almost perfectly with each improvement. He sees it now, clearly. This is not coincidence. This is connection. Later that night, he finds Clare in the hallway, rubbing her temples between rounds. "You should eat something," he says quietly. Clare looks up, startled. "I will later. That is what people say when they do not," Ethan replies. She almost smiles. Almost. They walk a few steps together in silence. The kind that feels heavy at first, then oddly comfortable. "You put yourself at risk," Clare says finally. "For me." "For the patient," Ethan corrects. She studies him. "You did not have to." "No," he agrees. "I chose to." The word hangs between them. Choice. Clare nods slowly. "Then we both did." In the days that follow, Ethan finds himself lingering more often, asking questions that go beyond charts, listening when Clare explains not just what she does, but why. He learns she grew up watching her mother navigate chronic illness with little support. That medicine, for her, was never about prestige. It was about presence. Clare learns that Ethan once lost a patient because he waited too long for perfect data, that the memory still wakes him at night. Years later, these are not confessions. They are acknowledgments. Quiet. Careful. Honest. One afternoon, the patient squeezes Clare's hand again. Stronger this time. She laughs softly, unable to stop herself. Ethan hears it from the doorway. The sound catches him off guard. He realizes he has not heard that kind of laughter in a hospital room in a very long time. When the patient finally opens his eyes for more than a second, the room fills with controlled urgency. Nurses move quickly. Doctors assess. Clare steps back, giving space, even though every instinct tells her to stay close. Ethan notices. Later, when the room settles again, he speaks. "You did this," he says quietly. Clare shakes her head. "We did." Ethan considers the correction. For the first time, it does not feel like a challenge. It feels like an invitation. As he walks away that night, Ethan understands something he has avoided for years. Healing is not just about fixing what is broken. Sometimes, it is about allowing yourself to be changed by the act of caring. And that realization, more than any risk he has taken so far, is what truly frightens him. Because once distance cracks, it cannot be rebuilt the same way. And he is no longer sure he wants it to be. The hospital reacts the way institutions always do when something unexpected works. With suspicion. The patient's awakening makes headlines inside the building before it ever reaches the outside world. Emails circulate. Meetings are scheduled. Words like anomaly and exposure appear more often than congratulations. Clare feels the shift immediately. Her schedule changes without explanation. She is reassigned to different units for parts of her shift, pulled away from room 614 under the guise of balance and training requirements. The message is polite, but unmistakable. Too much influence, too much attention. One morning, she arrives to find another resident standing outside room 614, flipping through the chart. "I was told to take over this morning," the resident says, apologetic. "Temporary," Claire nods, forcing calm into her voice. "Of course." End quote. She walks away, every step heavier than the last. Down the hall, Ethan is called into a closed-door meeting with risk management and senior administrators. The atmosphere is tight, professional, controlled. "This case has drawn attention," one administrator says. "External attention." "Positive attention," Ethan replies. "Uncontrolled attention," another corrects. "If complications arise, questions will be asked. About oversight, about boundaries." Ethan listens without interrupting. "We believe it would be prudent," the risk manager continues, "to transition care fully to senior staff, remove unnecessary variables." Ethan knows exactly who they mean. "That resident is not a variable," he says evenly. "She is a liability," the administrator counters. "Emotionally involved, unpredictable." Ethan feels a familiar anger rise. Old instincts urge him to retreat, to protect the institution, to protect himself. He has done it before. He does not do it now. "She followed protocol," Ethan says. "She documented every step, and the patient improved." "Correlation is not causation," the administrator replies. "No," Ethan agrees. "But dismissal is not leadership." The room goes quiet. That afternoon, Claire is summoned again. This time, the decision has already been made. She is to be removed from primary involvement in the case, effective immediately. No reprimand, no formal discipline, just distance. Claire stands there, nodding, absorbing each word. "I understand," she says when they finish. She leaves the room with her spine straight and her heart in pieces. In room 614, the patient stirs restlessly that evening. He turns his head, searching. When Claire is not there, his breathing becomes uneven. The nurse notes it. Ethan notices too. He stands outside the room long after his shift ends, watching the monitors flicker. This is the cost. This is what happens when systems protect themselves instead of people. Later that night, Ethan finds Claire in the stairwell, sitting on the steps, head bowed, hands clenched together. "They took you off," he says quietly. "Yes," Claire replies. Her voice is steady, but her eyes are not. "I expected it." "You should not have had to," Ethan says. Claire lets out a slow breath. "This is how it works." Ethan shakes his head. "It does not have to." She looks up at him then. Really looks. "Are you willing to push back?" she asks. "Because if you do, it will not stop with me." Ethan does not answer right away. He thinks of the board, the donors, the reputation he spent decades building. He also thinks of a patient who squeezed a resident's hand because she stayed when no one else did. "Yes," he says finally. "I am." The decision lands between them like a weight, a dangerous one, because choosing healing over hierarchy means confrontation is coming. And this time, there will be no quiet compromise. Only truth, only consequences, and neither of them can turn back now. The confrontation does not happen in a single moment. It unfolds in layers. Meetings stretch longer. Emails are rewritten. Language becomes careful, then sharper. Ethan sits across from people who have known him for years and realizes how rarely he has challenged them. This time, he does not back down. He presents the data, not selectively, completely. The timeline, the improvements, the correlation between consistency and responsiveness, the measurable changes that followed Claire's presence. "This is not sentiment," he says calmly. "This is evidence." Someone scoffs. Someone warns him about precedent. Ethan listens, then speaks again. "Precedent is set every day," he says. "The question is whether we set one that protects comfort or one that protects care." Silence follows. Not agreement, but attention. That afternoon, Claire is called back in. She enters the room prepared for disappointment, prepared to accept whatever comes next with dignity. Ethan is there. So are the administrators. "We are reinstating you to the case," one of them says. "With oversight." Claire exhales, barely audible. "Thank you." Ethan meets her eyes. It is not triumph he sees there. It is relief. When Claire returns to room 614, the patient responds almost immediately. His eyes open longer now, his grip steadier. When she speaks, his breathing calms. "You are back," she says softly, unable to hide the warmth in her voice. He squeezes her hand. This time, there is no doubt. The days that follow bring steady progress. Physical therapy begins. Speech assessments follow. The patient learns to form words again, slowly, painfully. Through it all, Claire remains constant. And through watching her, Ethan changes. He starts arriving earlier, staying later, asking nurses how they are doing, sitting with families without glancing at his watch. One evening, as the patient rests after a difficult session, Ethan and Claire stand together at the window. "You know," Ethan says quietly, "I built this place to be the best." Claire nods. "It is. I thought that meant technology," he continues. "Efficiency. Control." She waits. "I forgot," he says, "that healing requires trust." Claire looks at him then, really looks, and sees a man not confessing failure, but acknowledging growth. "You did not forget," she says gently. "You just stopped listening to that part of yourself." Ethan considers this. Perhaps she is right. Weeks later, the patient walks his first assisted steps down the hallway. Staff gathers. Quiet applause breaks out. Claire stands back, tears in her eyes. Ethan stands beside her. "This is because of you," he says. Claire shakes her head. "It is because he was seen." Ethan smiles, a real one this time. In that moment, he understands the truth. Her choice did not just change the outcome of one patient. It changed the way he leads, the way he measures success, the way he allows himself to care. And as he watches Claire celebrate a victory she never claimed for herself, Ethan knows that the most profound healing in this building did not happen in room 614. It happened inside him, quietly, irreversibly, and for the first time in a long time, he welcomes it. Spring arrives quietly, not with ceremony, but with light, the kind that lingers longer in hospital hallways and softens the edges of long days. Room 614 is empty now. The patient was discharged 2 weeks ago, walking slowly but steadily, leaving behind a handwritten note taped to the door. Claire reads it once every shift, not because she needs reassurance, but because it reminds her why she chose this path. "Thank you for staying," it says. Nothing more. Claire's rotation ends shortly after. She receives her evaluation in the same small conference room where doubt once lived. This time, the words are different. Thorough, compassionate, trusted. She is offered a position in a specialized program focused on patient-centered care, a path few residents are invited into so early. She accepts without hesitation. Ethan Caldwell announces changes soon after. Not loudly, not dramatically. New guidelines that protect continuity of care. Training programs that value presence alongside performance. Quiet reforms that ripple through the system. Some resist, some adapt. Leadership, Ethan learns, is not about forcing change. It is about standing still long enough for others to see what matters. On Claire's last night on the floor, she and Ethan walk the hallway together one final time. No audience, no urgency. "You never asked for recognition," Ethan says. Claire smiles faintly. "I never needed it." Reside. They stop near the window where city lights reflect against glass. "You reminded me," Ethan continues, "that wealth and authority do not heal people. Choices do." Claire meets his gaze. "Then make the right ones count." They part without promises, without drama. What connects them now does not need words. Months later, Ethan stands in the same hallway, watching new residents move with purpose. He notices one pause beside a patient, choosing to stay an extra moment. He smiles to himself. Healing, he has learned, is not something you control. It is something you allow. Claire moves forward with quiet confidence, carrying nothing from this story except what truly matters: integrity, presence, and the knowledge that even the smallest choice, made with care, can change everything. Not just a life, but a system. And sometimes, the person watching from the doorway, who finally learns how to step inside,